So student success is really about building the EQ habits that'll enable you to navigate a range of environments, whether you're a doctor treating a patient, a teacher with a preschooler who may be out of hand, or more importantly, a parent who may have lots of demands, or an investment banker, helping our students build these habits so it becomes just how they show up in the world. That's really what we're working on.
That was Francesca Schuler, an accomplished executive who now leads the Dialogue Vanderbilt program. We had a great conversation about how they're building the skills and habits around empathy and emotional intelligence to elevate students' EQ so that they can be effective, inspiring leaders and people who can just get stuff done, move things forward. We talked about the lessons from phones and social media that we all have to unlearn, the programs they put in place at Vanderbilt, and how this shows up in school, work, and life. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Connected College Podcast. I'm your host, Elliot Felix. I've helped more than 100 colleges and universities change what they offer, how they operate, and the way they're organized to enable student success. Join me for insightful interviews with higher ed innovators sharing the stories, stats, and strategies to create better connected colleges and universities. Welcome, Francesca. I'm so excited about our conversation on EQ and student success. I think it's such a critical and important topic, and I'm really excited to hear all the great stuff you're doing and help folks learn from it.
Thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to our conversation.
I'd love to hear how you got started. I know you're a relatively recent convert to higher ed, and tell us a little bit about how you got started in higher ed and what you're up to today.
Yes, definitely new to the industry, as it were, which has been great actually, but spent most of my career in the private sector, really in leadership roles in mostly consumer businesses, also led a nonprofit. But I came at this really through a long career in business where leadership development was my passion and spent a lot of time on it and worked with some amazing teams to develop some great cultures where people could really progress and really started to realize that so many of the fundamental leadership habits that I think make you successful from your first job all the way to your last job, you start developing those really early. And college is one of the key places where you can really develop them. And you can also experiment with them a little bit in college, which I think is nice, which often in a new job or once you started your career, you're more reluctant to experiment with because you're busy just trying to do a good job. So that was one thing that brought me really passionate about how do we help the next generation develop better leadership skills than we have. We always want the next generation to be better than us. And how could we take experience and apply it in the new world in the college setting to help currently Gen Z develop some of those skills, start practicing them and learning them in the college setting. And that's really what brought me to it. I have a 25 and a 21-year-old. I have huge optimism about the generation that's coming through, but I do think there are some challenges that have impacted their ability to develop leadership skills early. So thought that would be a good use to take my experience and hopefully apply it in partnership with all the amazing leaders and faculty members at Vanderbilt.
I think that's really great. And it reminds me of, they say, when's the best time to plant a tree 100 years ago? And when's the second best time right now? So I think you're moving to think about how you build those skills, how you plant those trees as early as possible so that we do have an amazing next generation of leaders. And I think leadership is one of those areas that's so great at making these connections and busting the silos across campus because you can have student affairs and academic affairs and athletics and alumni relations, mentoring, all these things can play their part. So it's really cool. And I would love to hear a little bit more about how you're doing that. What's your program called? What are you doing to tackle this area?
The other thing that I would add is I was in marketing for a long time, so I believe in getting to know your customer before you try to solve their problems. And I think
Yeah.
often as experienced leaders, we all want to share and impart our wisdom, but we often
Hmm.
do it through the lens of our own life, which is only really relevant to us. It is
Right.
not relevant to a 21-year-old. And I can still remember rolling my eyes when my previous boss would be like, when I was doing what you were doing. So I didn't want to, I don't think that's a helpful way to share wisdom. I think you have to really understand the context in which young people are operating today, and then what are the skills that we can help, and how do we share that in their language effectively. So that's what really led me. I am the exec director of Dialogue Vanderbilt, which is an initiative that was launched at Vanderbilt a few years ago to really accelerate and continue Vanderbilt's commitment to creating a campus culture of free expression and civil discourse. It's something that's a
I
core.
disagree. No, I'm just kidding.
One of my favorite questions to ask is, when was the last time you changed your mind? Because we're
Oh, that's a
quite
great one.
eager to say, I disagree. That's our instinct, is to do that. And I'm sure we'll talk more about some of our hypotheses on that. But one of the questions we open a lot of our work with is, when is the last time you changed your mind? And it stumps a lot of adults, actually. Our students tend to answer that question faster than adults. But really, Vanderbilt's had a commitment to free expression and civil discourse since the university was founded. And while some may wonder, Dialogue Vanderbilt, what does that have to do with leadership? Really, my experience, and I think research shows that the great leaders are the ones that have both high IQ and high EQ. And I view the ability to express your opinion effectively, to navigate a range of different opinions to get things done, to work with a diverse group of people, an essential part of leadership. And to do that well, you really have to do it through conversation. That's how it works. And so there is a very direct linkage between constructive dialogue and civil discourse and great leadership. Whether you're in the public sector, private sector, higher ed, it doesn't matter. Those skills really apply. And so this role has given me an opportunity to jump in and really figure out, how do we complement what's in the classroom, what's in student life, and help our students really build that EQ muscle, which I call healthy dialogue habits. One of the things I always say is, one of the number one rules in business is, don't hire yourself, surround yourself with people different than you. And I adhere to that wholeheartedly. But if you do that and you don't know how to effectively navigate conversation, unleash potential, work with them effectively, it defeats the purpose. And in today's world, I think that's a skill that has been diminished for a long list of reasons, and happy to chat about that. So that's what we're working on at Vanderbilt.
It sounds like an amazing, inspiring program. And you're talking about all the things you're trying to encourage, the dialogue, the collaboration, igniting potential, the communication. As you're defining leadership, I feel like the Venn diagram of leadership and student success has a lot of overlap. And I'm wondering, as you're trying to help students be successful as leaders, how do you define that? Like, how do you define student success, and what's the role that these kind of leadership competencies and mindsets and tools play in that?
There's lots of dimensions, I think, of student
Yeah.
success. So I'm going to
Yeah.
stick to where I'm playing. It's student,
Sure.
because I think there's success in the classroom, success in making friends, success in finding your interest in a lot of places. But I think one of the key areas that we're really focused on and define student success is the ability to not just identify problems and figure out how to solve them, but how to solve them with others and get things done. And that means building healthy daily habits. And that's something we talk a lot about. I'm a big believer in habits. As a leader, you find it's easy to be a quote, good leader when there's not a lot of stress and you're not under the gun, so you can practice all your great leadership skills. But your true test of what you are as a leader is when you're under pressure. And that's when you really fall back on your habits. And if you have
Right.
habits that are about my way or the highway, or I'm not going to listen to anyone else, or I'm just going to drive ahead and just hope for the best and not ask for any additional input, or anyway, a long list of things, that's what you're going to fall back on. And as we all know, whether you're in your first job or your 10th job out of college, there's going to be many moments of stress. So student success is really about building the EQ habits that'll enable you to navigate a range of environments, whether you're a doctor treating a patient, a teacher with a preschooler who may be out of hand, or more importantly, a parent who may have lots of demands, or an investment banker, helping our students build these habits so it becomes just how they show up in the world. That's really what we're working on. And so our students, we know, have incredible IQs. to get into school like Vanderbilt and many elite colleges. They're really smart, really curious, doing a lot of things, and we want to make sure that we balance the EQ and the IQ successfully. So that's how we're defining it at Dialogue Vanderbilt. It's building healthy dialogue habits, which is really about healthy EQ.
Yeah, and that's what enables you to solve problems with others and get things done, which I love both of those things. What are some of these healthy habits? I feel immediately self-conscious, by the way, because as we're talking about this, I'm going to be the whole time and be like, "Oh, do I do that or
You probably
not?"
do. I'm just
Yeah,
going to
hope
say, and
like
I do too.
let's hope. I'm sure there's some things I could learn though from your
Yeah. Well,
program.
and I think the World Economic Forum did a great
Yeah.
analysis of what skills are going to be needed in 2030, particularly in a very AI-driven world. And those are the things you'd expect: work on diverse teams, navigate conflict. But if we boil it down to day-to-day practical habits, the way I frame the discussion is, what habits are we not developing or are we unlearning if we had them? And those are in a large part due to technology. So technology has many amazing things, but what it really has done is help us learn what I would consider non-constructive habits. So examples would be, we now say things in 280 character sound bites. That
Hmm.
is not usually a very thoughtful or intentional point of view. That would be probably a hot, fast take. We are learning to react versus respond. Even on Zoom now, people are clapping and sending emojis, et cetera. We're learning that the way you say good or bad is through a happy or an angry an emoji or a thumbs up or thumbs down. And what you realize is if you're doing that a lot on your phone, on your computer, you start doing that in conversation. You start really being immediately reacting and not really responding. Technology has taught us to be quite performative. Just think about Zoom. We're always, how do we look on Zoom? How do we look on social media versus authentic leadership? That sort of thinking about how you're coming across or versus thinking about who do you really want to be. Technology has really moved us so much more in the performative or the versus the authentic leadership. And then think about comments. It's you and I had a discussion and you made a point and I managed to not give you a thumbs up or thumbs down, but I disagreed with you. I can just pontificate in the comment section and say
Yeah.
whatever I want and we don't engage. And so those are some examples of the habits that we're all unfortunately being trained. Everyone thinks it's a Gen Z problem. Adults are having the same issue. We're on our phones a lot. We're using technology a lot. So the things that we're really working on are things like listening to learn and understand versus listening to win. And we all, I think, struggle when you're in there and you're listening to a point, particularly something you feel passionate about. You shut out what the person's actually saying. And you're like, okay, I'm just going to get in. I'm going to get in there. I'm going to wait for a breath and then I'm going to go in and win. So listening to learn and understand is one. Asking with curiosity versus making a series of assumptions or interrogating. We all are guilty of this. Anyone who's seen The Breakfast Club, we all make
Hmm.
assumptions. That's a high school thing, a college thing, a grown-up thing.
Yeah.
But how do you ask questions with real curiosity versus making assumptions that you know what political background this person has because they made one comment around something? Another one we think a lot about is recognizing nuance. So we've become a very polarized society where we have a big program right now called 250 Conversations on America, Civil Discourse and Action. And it is not about modeling how people disagree better. It is that, but it's also modeling how people agree better. Because where we are right now, the habit we're building is that if I have sort of 10 points in a philosophy and you have 10 points and we don't exactly match our 10 points, I assume you're on the other team. That's what polarization has done for us. So the habit of understanding nuance and realizing we can agree to disagree on five of the 10 points, but we still generally play in the same sandbox and we can get things done and get things across the line. One more that I would say is assuming goodwill is a habit we
Hmm.
work on all the time. To the performative nature of technology, no one puts their real self on Instagram or TikTok or even on LinkedIn these days. And so we all are at this point where we're constantly passing judgment and we assume when someone says something we disagree with, it's with bad intent. So we're really focused on this idea of assume goodwill. Don't assume this person is coming from a bad place of values. So a lot of the work we're doing is how do you get to know other people's values before you debate beliefs? Because if you understand their values, then you know that where they're coming from, so you
Right.
have to agree with their beliefs. That's okay. But if you know the intent they're coming from, that completely changes the tone of the conversation. So those are some examples of the things we think about as healthy habits.
Those are great habits for students, and I think for the rest of us, I think in a way we're all students. Those sounded like really good things that would help our Congress too.
They would literally help all of us. It's
Yeah,
been interesting doing this work because it's forced me to be a lot more disciplined about what makes a good leader, what are EQ skills, et cetera. And so now I'm constantly assessing myself. I thought I assessed myself in the past, but now I'm doing it a lot more just in the moment. Am I really listening to understand or am I
right.
listening to win? And so a lot of this is just about awareness and why we use, as I mentioned, the word habits is then if you just practice them over and over again, you're going to have some bad days. You're going to have that Thanksgiving dinner where it goes awry, or that meeting where you just didn't listen to your team and went driving forward. But for the most part, if it's something you practice every day, I always say it's just like going to the gym. If you keep doing it and you establish the routines, it will be how you naturally show up. And research shows that people get hired for IQ and get fired for EQ. And so if you've got
Right.
EQ habits, it prepares you well for the workplace.
Such a great set of habits, and it's such a great approach to inculcate these ideas now so that they're there when you need them. And one of my favorite change frameworks is the behavioral change wheel, that the thesis of which is people change at the intersection of motivation, ability, and opportunity, right? And I wonder, besides the fabulous programming you're doing to build these habits, are there things you're doing to nudge students toward success? Like I'm seeing now campuses do phone-free spaces, adjust the environment, the calendar. Some campuses have wellness days or spots in the weekly calendar where there's no classes. Is there anything the environment can do to contribute to forming and sustaining these habits?
A great question. And I do think environment matters. Being intentional about space and time, not just about one more program that a student has to go through. So we have a variety of these because I do think tech-free, creating space and time, as I mentioned, matters. So we launched a new concept last fall called the Vandy Speakeasy, and
Hmm.
pun completely intended.
Yeah.
So the idea is we create spaces on campus. They're tech free. We bring students together. We bring students and faculty together. We now are getting lots of requests from alum and parents to do them. So we're doing them with alum and parents. And really the spirit of it is as follows, is we bring, sometimes there are 25 people that have never met before. Sometimes they're a bunch of student athletes and who, again, are athletes, but don't necessarily know each other that well. And we talk about leadership on campus. There's some loose conversation topics just to get it going. There's usually food because that matters, as we know, with students, everyone,
Hmm.
and adults, they like to be
Yeah.
fed. And just let the conversation go. And every single one of them that we have done has gone over 2 hours, which is as when on a college
Amazing.
campus, no
Yeah.
one does anything for 2 hours. Everyone is
Yeah.
so busy and pre-programmed. And the joy you feel in the room, it is experiencing the joy of conversation again. So if you think about Ray Oldenburg's book on the third place,
Hmm.
we've essentially created a third place. So it's not your dorm, it's not the classroom, it's a place where you can come and have a conversation. And it's been amazing the impact that's had. We're doing it with faculty as well. One of the things we're quite interested in doing more of is generational conversations, because I think a lot of the conflict or misunderstanding of each other happens to be because when I was started my career, we didn't have Slack and we didn't have Zoom and a variety of things. And so you interacted in a certain way. And now young people, that's all they use. And that creates friction and you don't know how to have a good conversation about it. So the Vandy Speakeasy, I think, is one of our best examples of creating space and time. We did one recently where a student walked in and said, I've not been invited to a tech-free environment since middle school. And I'm so excited. And
Nice.
many of them have opened up new friendships, new relationships, and just I think a reminder of how good it feels to just take a couple hours and have a conversation. And they've ranged from big, meaty geopolitical topics to, what does leadership mean on campus at Vanderbilt? Sometimes they're even lighter touch than that. What do you do to just unwind? And usually we cover all of the above in the 2 hours. Another example, we just brought in a bunch of student leaders from very disparate organizations who really probably never interact. And they came in and had this incredible conversation on how are you a leader on campus? How are you forwarding the mission? How can they work together to maybe help each other? So that's an example of something that sounds so obvious, creating space and time for a couple hour conversation, but it's easy to forget to do that. Our residential colleges at Vanderbilt are designed around this as well. We do a lot of programming in our residential colleges as well for students to come do that. But I think we get so busy that if we don't make time and space, you think you're having conversations, and there can be a week that goes by or a month that goes by that your conversations have been purely about getting something done, something in class, your social life with your friends, but you haven't really had a thoughtful conversation with someone maybe you didn't know that well. So now we have guests who are coming. We had a congressman come on Monday who did a speakeasy with 25 students. This is great. His wife had to drag him out there. He was having such a good time because it changes the tone. It's just a real
Yeah.
conversation.
It makes me think that norms are so closely related to habits, right? Creating the space and time has to do with how you set cultural norms, and they can either encourage or discourage the kinds of habit formation you're looking for. So, creating the norms around this is a phone-free space, or this is a place for open dialogue, or this is a place where everyone's welcome, or whatever, however you set those norms, you're creating the condition for the right kinds of conversations, I think is so powerful. And then the other thing that seems related is maybe the cousin of norms and habits is rituals. In a way, those are what define a culture. So are there milestone rituals in Dialogue Vanderbilt? Do people graduate? Is there a certification? What are the rituals you're building as part of this program?
So we have a variety of leadership opportunities that we offer in Dialogue Vanderbilt for students who really want to be role models on campus. They help us with programming, so we design student relevant programming. But really, one of their core roles is to model what's it like to build a team together and what's it like to be a role model of open dialogue with people that are very different than you. Now, at Vanderbilt, free expression on campus is a core value. So we have already set the stage. To your point, there is a norm of that on campus, which is very helpful. I know other campuses struggle with that. That is not something we struggle with at Vanderbilt. That's a core foundational university principle and why a lot of students attend Vanderbilt and faculty work there. But our student leaders end up doing a variety of things. So they end up creating a whole series of programs to engage students. So the speakeasy is one. Another one that students designed was the free expression board. So they put a fun question up and people can respond their thoughts on it. Anything from where do you think America is today to what's your favorite class at Vandy? They lead a whole series of lunch and learns where they invite professors that they think other students would benefit from and engage in very open dialogue with them. So it's a leadership role that is it's quite competitive, but they serve as great role models and also help us design programming. I think the biggest thing for them though is what they do well is they spend time getting to know each other and really operate as a team. And in so many club environments, that people are there because it's like we got to get done what the club's supposed to be doing, whatever the club
Right.
or the fraternity or the sorority. So you're so busy focusing on doing that you don't spend enough time doing team building. And our students really spend time getting to know each other. They have a speakeasy just for them. They do several times a month. The conversations, I'm telling you, we have covered it all. It's great.
Yeah.
And there's no conversation off the table. And you realize that a lot of the struggles in the workplace that people are having in terms of strong cultures with hybrid work, people on Zoom, all of us back to back meetings. We haven't built in enough time just to get to know each other at work. So the good news about these students is they are going to show up in whatever environment that they go to and make time for this. They will be role models, not just at Vanderbilt, but role models in their workplaces. The other thing we're doing is we're putting it into a global setting. So we just launched a new fellowship where students can take the skills they're building and think about it in a very different context. So we're taking a group of students to Northern Ireland. How do you think about using these skills in a part of the world that was very divided for a long time and still essentially in peace building mode? Another group's going to think about democracy, and we're working with a university in Denmark. And how do we think about dialogue and democracy? Because if you just follow the news, you assume there is no dialogue and democracy anymore. So
Hmm.
how can these students be role models? We're trying to really have our students not just engage for themselves, but show up in the world as examples for others, which hopefully then others will follow.
I love that. You were hinting at how, as students build these skills, listening to learn, asking with curiosity, understanding nuance, understanding how technology can be performative and so forth, how do these enable student success? So how does this show up in the classroom, outside of it, and in careers and in the workplace? What does this enable them to do?
It enables students to show up both in the classroom and in their student life and also in their careers as one, just a team player, which sounds so obvious, but when you've been in a very competitive to get into college, competitive to do well at school. I think one of the things I love about Vanderbilt, it's while it's a highly competitive school from in terms of level of academics, the students themselves, there's no jabbing elbows. It is a community-driven school, but these students are going to show up able and confident to have a point of view, even though they may feel uncomfortable. That's a big thing that social media has shut down. When I went to college or even early in my career, I'd offer a point of view probably sometimes I shouldn't have. I'll acknowledge that. But there wasn't this sense of, oh my God, someone's going to film me or someone's going to post about me. You didn't have that fear. And that has impacted all of us. It's impacted all of us as managers in the workplace, as faculty, as students. And by building these skills of being okay feeling uncomfortable, learning how to share your point of view and listens to others effectively versus having it be combative, our students are going to graduate with an ability to move things forward, which is really the goal. In the end, yes, great conversation matters. We all love having great conversations, but in the end, what we really want to do is help our students be someone who moves things forward, whatever that is that they're trying to move forward. And that's what I think our students are going to be able to do. They're going to have the courage to have a point of view. They are not going to be afraid to engage with someone who may have a very different point of view. And definitely from my experience, the best ideas came when two people came at it from a completely different way, wrestled through some healthy conflict, and created an incredible solution. It's very rare that one person had the genius idea all by themselves. And so I think our students can be very prepared to do this.
Yeah, for sure. There's the Cantor-Isaacs model of group dynamics, and it's for an effective team, you have to have a proposer, an opposer, an advisor, and an implementer, basically, right? So unless you have someone who's not just proposing ideas, but also opposing it and challenging it and making it better, and then someone who's giving impartial advice and someone who wants to see it executed, nothing goes anywhere. And these skills seem so super valuable. As we wrap up, as you carry this forward, as you think about the future, how is building these EQ habits, norms, skills, how might that change and evolve? You're co-curricular now. Do you see a future where you're integrated into the first year experience, or there's a required class, or shine up your crystal ball and tell us a little bit about how this may grow and change and evolve in the future?
So we are already big on collaboration. As someone who's new to higher ed, it's been awesome to see how welcoming everyone has been to collaborate at Vanderbilt. We are not here to compete with curricular. We have many faculty teaching leadership classes and things like that. Where we have been of service are workshops. We have a civil discourse lab that has workshops that we develop in partnership with faculty. Where those have been helpful is we are part of the orientation. We call it Visions. It's a 6 weeks orientation program. Several of our workshops are part of that now. So in both in terms of how do you dialogue about across difference, but also how do you get to know someone? I think one of the things I've seen in this work in higher ed and even outside higher ed is everyone is so focused on just the dialogue part, like how do you interact and how do you debate effectively, that they forget step one, which is really about how do you want to show up. So our workshops start with what are your values? How do you think about your beliefs? How do you think about updating your beliefs? How do your behaviors align with your beliefs? So we have a more holistic approach. And so some of that's in our orientation program. Our workshops go into the classroom. So we've had situations where maybe a class is very big, a lot of people aren't speaking up. Professor will be like, hey, can we come do a workshop and maybe break down some of the barriers? We're doing this with staff and with faculty as well. So we view our role as a very practical solution to practice and build habits across campus in support of the amazing work that's going on in the classroom, all the things going on in student life, residential life, et cetera. So we view ourselves very much as complementary. And I would say this is where my, I think, business and operating background comes in is they're practical, they're short. And what's really unique about our workshops is we're really leaning into peer-to-peer learning. So our students are facilitators. So we have a whole program that's trained student facilitators and they facilitate the workshop. We've even sent our students to facilitate our workshops with alumni. We're now getting all these requests. We've done a couple of them. People are like, yeah, I need to practice that. Can I have more of that? And so, what a great opportunity for a
Yeah.
student. We had a student recently go back to his high school and take seniors and the faculty through one of our workshops. So, that's how the impact spreads, I think. And again, we're a complementary solution, which I think often people think I'm doing this and you're doing that, and it can feel competitive. And we've very much designed our programming to think about what are challenges that exist and how do we create a complementary solution, and how are we really focused on practical solutions where you practice them in that immediate workshop. It's not an hour of PowerPoint, it's literally you are doing and practicing and all of that. So we're involved in a lot of parts of campus already. I'm sure and hope that we will be involved in a lot more. We're also quite interested in working with alum, and even one of the areas that we're quite interested in is multi-generational conversations. That's a real friction in the workplace right now, and we think could be helpful both to our students, preparing them well, but also to alum and others who may be like, how do I interact effectively as a manager? How can we help bridge that? Because there's a lot of research that's showing a lot of productivity is lost because that conversation isn't working well. So we see lots of different places we could go, and we're excited about the opportunity, but most of all, really excited about how students have been engaging in this, understanding it, and seeing and wanting to be leaders who demonstrate IQ and EQ.
As we close this out, what's one final piece of advice you have for folks?
I think the thing that I really hope is that everyone stops referring to EQ's skills as soft skills. They are actually harder
Really
skills,
hard.
hard
Yeah.
skills. And so I always refer to them as essential skills. And because the minute you hear soft, you think, oh, I don't need that. They are not optional. These really are essential. So my one hope is that we all start leaning in and viewing that these skills are essential and as critical as hard skills. So that would be my hope.
Yeah, I have that hope too, and I love that. And I think the essential is better than durable, which I think is the other swing people are taking at rebranding soft skills. And when I hear durable, I think like durable goods. I think like we're talking about like commodities or something. And these are even more valuable. So great stuff. Francesca, thanks so much for a great conversation and all the great work you're doing at Dialogue Vanderbilt. It's so valuable, so timely, and so inspiring. So thanks very much.
Thanks so much for having me, and thank you for your work. It helps all of us as well. So appreciate the contribution you're making to higher ed and having all of us think about student success. So I appreciate your leadership in that. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Thanks for listening to the Connected College podcast. Go to elliottfelix.com for more information about my book, The Connected College, articles I've written, and talks I've given. There's also tools you can download, information on upcoming events, and information on booking me to speak at your institution or organization. Please support the podcast by rating it and reviewing it wherever you're listening. Let's create connected colleges where all students succeed.